Okay, we are looking at Aristotle. Yesterday I gave you what is probably the most tedious part of a discussion of Aristotle, the 10 categories. But you all have it down, and you will have it mastered by this Friday, because I will be asking you to regurgitate a little of that data on a test that I will be giving you at that time. And as I told you, I'll give you Thursday to get ready for that on Friday, and shouldn't be any big surprises on it. I think you'll be able to anticipate pretty much what you'll see there. The one thing that I want you to get from Aristotle, I touched on it yesterday, but please understand this, that we have these two ways of thinking. We were sort of getting to this at the end of the period. Deduction, induction. I don't know that we quite clarified it sufficiently by the end of our conversation, but I think we were getting there. I think Matthew was commenting on the angry look on Trevor's face or some such thing. Wasn't that where we left it off?
Yeah.
And I was trying to reconstruct Matthew's observation in the form of a deductive syllogism. And I think Josiah took a run at it and got us at least somewhere down the road. But give me the standard deductive syllogism. If you're just taking Philosophy 101 or Logic 101 more likely, and the prof is going to get up and try to explain deduction. So, who knows the standard deductive syllogism? Usually always is the point where you start a conversation on deduction, and it is. Somebody know it? Jake?
If A, then B.
Well, yeah, that is not exactly what I'm after. That's a fine answer. That's more reasoning by implication, but it's a little bit different. It actually is a form of that. But you know, all men are mortal. Y'all heard that? What is that, Stephen? Give me that little. He shakes his head affirmatively, so I assume you know it.
All men are mortal.
Okay, all men are mortal.
And say like Mr. Gore's man. Oh wait, what are we doing here?
Oh, that's fine.
Mr. Gore's man.
Mr. Gore is a man.
Therefore,
Mr. Gore is mortal. Which really does raise the question how he's lived so long. You know? So who knows? But we'll assume that for the sake of this. All men are mortal. Mr. Gore is a man. Mr. Gore is mortal. Would it follow, Avery, if all men are mortal and Mr. Gore is mortal, that Mr. Gore is therefore a man? Does that follow? No. That is a fallacy, right? And so you've studied that. You've all done this little exercise and much more complicated things. Now, every deductive syllogism like this depends, I'll just say this kind of bluntly, depends, however, on a certain degree of induction. So where does the induction show up that lies behind this deductive syllogism? Where do you see induction going on with respect to this syllogism? Megan?
Well, in the first premise, it's taking an individual thing like a man and then getting a more general conclusion from it.
In a sense, yeah.
So,
that's right. Okay. Can we clarify? That's a pretty good start. What were you going to say, Avery? You had your hand up? I saw it.
Yes.
Too late to deny it?
Well, I was thinking the opposite.
So what were you thinking?
We start with a general statement that all men are mortal, and we go to a specific statement that Mr. Gore is mortal.
Right.
And so that's what I was gathering was induction, the fact that we took something general and applied it to something specific.
That is deduction. When you start with the general and move to the particular, that is deductive. So you think of deduction kind of like a funnel going down to a particular point. Broad statement, all men are mortal. Particular conclusion, Mr. Gore is mortal. I was trying to come up with a clever deductive comment to make about all Duprees or something, you know, but I couldn't come up with anything. Yeah, so, well, tell me, my son, are you tardy this morning?
Yeah.
Are you just going to admit it right up front? There you are. It's always nice. So thank you, Alicia, for adjusting that. Induction moves in the opposite direction. You start with individual observation and move to generalizations. My question is, in what sense do you see induction at work in this little syllogism? Where is the induction happening? There's at least two examples here of induction. Mr. Fugit, where is induction happening in this syllogism? And a look of despair on his face. Laura, can you help him out? Where is there? And it's actually much more obvious than probably most of you are thinking. Can't think of it. Sarah?
Aren't we inducting that you are a man?
That's one point where we're doing induction. Where's the other point?
And that all men are mortal?
That all men are mortal. How did we come to the conclusion that all men are mortal? Did that just come to us in a dream? How do you make that, generalization? You do it by looking at men. You go out into the world and you start looking at individual men, bing, 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 100,000 of them, and you notice that eventually they all die. And so you say to yourself, I've seen 100,000 men. I notice that in each and every case they die, and I'm going to generalize from that something that is much bigger than my observations. I'm going to leap from 100,000 individual men to all men. Right? That's induction. I go out and look at 10 squirrels. I see 10 squirrels have bushy tails. And by an inductive generalization, I say, I saw 10 squirrels with bushy tails. I'm going to generalize from that, all squirrels have bushy tails. So that when I say, that Ben is a squirrel, not this Ben, of course, I can safely conclude what, Kayla?
But he has a bushy tail.
Who?
Ben.
Ben, not this Ben, right? Y'all see that? Every, kind of exercise of knowledge, you might say, is going to be a mix of induction and deduction. That would be disputed by some, but as a general rule, it's taken to be the way it has to be. And so, when we look at Aristotle, Aristotle thinks that Plato has put too much emphasis on deduction and has really ignored the vast underpinnings of deduction that requires a certain degree of induction. And so that's really what he is emphasizing. But Aristotle doesn't despise deduction, he likes it. And he's very much a champion of deductive reasoning, but he thinks we need to face the music. To do any kind of deduction correctly, we have to acknowledge that there's a little bit of induction going on. The great exception to that rule, the one probably most conspicuous exception to that rule, the guy who thinks you can do pure deduction, you don't need any induction at all, you can basically start with pure reason and come out with all knowledge, at least in theory, that's what he would say, is a guy by the name of, and it's not Plato, I wonder if anybody knows who that would be.
Is that Socrates?
Not Socrates, no, I don't think so at least. You may not know this, but make a little mental note of it because we will come back to it later. This will be a good guy to report on. His name is Descartes. Okay? Descartes. Descartes does have this notion that you can begin with something that is certain by pure reason, and from that reason, from that pure, reasonable, premise, get everything else. What is the premise that he believes you can know, not by induction, not by observation, but by just pure intuition? You know it has to be true, and from that he wants to give you everything else. It's famous, you've probably all heard it. What is Descartes' starting point? He thinks he can start somewhere with something other than an inductively derived, premise, and give you everything else as a result. It's the most famous statement of Descartes, and I'm sure you've all heard it at some point. And it is, Spencer?
That I think, therefore I am.
Exactly. Did you have that? There you go. Because notice, you don't perceive your thinking, do you? You just think. And Descartes thinks, therefore, that he can bypass that need for induction. Yes? For Aristotle, therefore, the task in reasoning it depends heavily on induction, and his peculiar way of describing induction is by moving things you experience from one class to another. And I did tell you that yesterday, so this is fair game for the test. And what is that move? What does induction require in Aristotelian terms? What are you doing? Anybody? This is in your notes, hopefully, from yesterday. You are moving objects from one class to another, and the classes are?
From the primary class to the secondary class.
Okay, from primary substance to secondary substance. Got that? That is induction. This marker is an individual object. It's primary substance. When I give it the name marker, I've just moved it into the class called secondary substance. Avery.
Could you define nominalist? Because I
Yeah.
have that in my notes, but I don't know what it is.
Yep. Thank you for asking. Happy to do it. And it's good to touch on this because I tell you throughout the year, I will be throwing that term out there, and invariably I will say, and remind me once again, Alicia, what was nominalism? And every year I get blank stares. So somebody is going to make a mental note that every time I ask the question, they're going to know the answer, and they're going to make me proud. Here we are. Nominalism is that philosophical outlook that says that things are what they are because we name them that way. This marker is a marker because I call it a marker. That chair is a chair because I call it a chair. I name it. Nominalism. There's no ideal chair. No perfect, eternal, essential, archetypal chair in which this particular chair participates, which Aristotle thinks is silly. He thinks what you do is you look at this world and you notice that a bunch of things sort of resemble each other, and so you just put them all in the same class, give them the name, and the name is chair. And that makes him a nominalist. Fair enough? That's it. So nominalism is distinguished from idealism. There's the idealism, Plato, nominalism, Aristotle. Go ahead.
Is it just for objects, or what about naming me Kaylee? Is that?
Well, naming you Kaylee is an activity of nominalism itself. Anytime you name anything.
Okay.
But it usually isn't applied in that case because we don't think of the class of things in this world that are all Kaylee. I mean, we could. There's probably, a few thousand people in America who are named Kaylee. Not a real common name, but I assume there's some others out there. So we could, but that's not the way we usually do it. But when I speak of chair or book or window or human, then I am putting a name on something that tends to classify it. So Aristotle's a nominalist. And for him, the technical definition, this is what I want to see if I ever ask you this, and it's what I want you to understand for Aristotle, is that mental process by which we move something from the status of primary to secondary substance. It's easy enough to say, it'll make me happy. But if you say something other than that, I will not be happy, you know. So just make sure you understand what I mean by that, what Aristotle was trying to get over by this.
Can you say that again?
Is that process, that mental process by which we move an object from the status of primary substance to secondary substance. I mean, that's not the only magic way to say it, but that's the concept. I want you to get the idea. What is primary substance? What is secondary substance? It's taking an object and moving it from one to the other.
Didn't you also say that was induction, though?
It's exactly what it is. Isn't that what I said?
Yeah.
That is induction, yeah. Right.
So it's nominalism and induction?
Well, it's induction and it's nominalism both. Nominalism is a philosophy that focuses on that inductive process. These are related ideas. Did that respond to your comment, Matthew? Okay. The next little topic I want to get to here with Aristotle has to do with his use of language. Aristotle, of course, is all about words. And I've said he's a nominalist, so that should not be a surprise to you. He's concerned about how we use language. And as Aristotle thought about language, he realized, by the by, that we can use words in a variety of ways, even when we're putting this object into the class of secondary substance. We can do it, in a sense, in a variety of ways. And as he reflected on it, he came up with, this is classic, it's classic Aristotelianism. Any serious study of Aristotle will definitely cover this stuff. So I'm just giving you a heads up. Here it comes. You heard it here first. Okay, so here it is. The three uses of language that Aristotle gives us. First of all, univocal or univocal. You'll hear it either way. I will tend to say univocal because that's the way I learned it, but I think it's more correct to say univocal. And it sounds a little classier, doesn't it? But either way is fine. Now, having given you that word, does anyone know what the other two words are? I just want to find out if this is absolutely new to you or if you've covered it somewhere along the way. Is this brand new? Okay. Anybody have a guess what the other words would be? You might guess them. Yeah.
Is there multivocal?
Well, good thought. No. But this is an intelligent guess. Okay, you got univocal. You've got equivocal. Which I know you've heard that word, but maybe not in this connection. And then, the third one, analogical. All right, univocal. Univocal means literally, as you know from your Latin studies, one voice. Here is the meaning. I will give it to you and then I will try to be quiet so you can write it down. I know it's frustrating for me to give you something and you're writing it, and meantime I'm 14 paragraphs down the road, so I know that is frustrating. I'll try to. So here it comes. Univocal language is language that. It means this. You apply one word to two different objects, but you mean basically the same thing with respect to both objects. You apply one word to two different objects, but you mean basically the same thing with respect to both objects.
So,
Is that talking about, like, naming things? Or-
Yes, naming things. That's the main thing we're talking about, but it's much broader than that.
Like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
All right. That depends on what you mean by cool.
Okay.
If you walk into the room and say, you know, wow, well, it's really a cool day today, meaning the temperature is low, and then you say to Mr. Gore, hey, Mr. Gore, you're really looking cool, you see, would that be univocal? Is that univocal? No, because you don't mean basically the same thing, unless you mean, Avery, that my body temperature is very low, and I've got a chill, and Mr. Gore, you're cool, you know, one step from dead kind of thing. Well, that's a different... All right, so if we use the word univocal, let's take the word, for example, bright. You know, it's a sunny day. I walk over to the window. I look outside, see the sun shining. Wow, it's a nice bright day. I come back in here, I look at the lights, and I say, and those are really bright lights. Got that projector. You can't see it, but I can. The light's on. It's bright. Am I using the word bright univocally in all of those applications? Answer? Yeah. Because in each case, what I mean is something that gives off light. You can light up the room with reference to those things that are bright. Right? Then, I come walking into the classroom, and I look at Kaylee, and I say, and wow, that Kaylee is really a bright young lady. All right? I've used the same word. Do I mean the same thing? Nicole? No. What do I mean if I say that Kaylee is a bright young lady?
Smart.
Okay, I mean smart. I don't mean that if we shut off all the lights in here, we could simply get along by the radiant energy flowing from Kaylee's skin. I don't mean that, do I? And none of you would take me to mean that. I mean, we could do the experiment and see, but I think we'll... Now, let me ask you this, a more subtle question. Is there any connection at all between my use of the word bright to describe the sun and my use of the word bright to describe Kaylee? Is there any connection at all? What do you think? Sydney, go ahead. Explain it.
I think so, because when we talk about a person being bright, we're kind of saying that their intelligence shines.
Yeah. But notice you've again used the word shine, right? In something other than a univocal way, haven't you? Notice how much of our language we just do this without really thinking much about it. You think of a Venn diagram, you know, here's one Venn diagram, or here's one circle that represents the word bright. And if I say, okay, bright sun, and then I say bright light bulb, I mean basically the same thing, don't I? A little bit of difference, a difference of degree. Then if I say Kaylee is bright, really the overlap is pretty thin. I don't mean bright in that sense, but I mean in some sense. Okay, that's equivocal. When you have a radical difference in the way the word is used, so that there's only one narrow point of contact in the meanings. Bright sun, bright Kaylee. Well, there's a little kind of point where those two meanings touch each other, but I don't mean the same thing quite at all. I neither mean that the sun is intelligent, nor do I mean that Kaylee glows in the dark. You know, I've got two different meanings going on, but they're not utterly, totally divorced from each other. You all follow what I'm saying there? A little bit of point of contact. That's equivocal. Sydney was illustrating the point of how, trying to explain what it means to say that Kaylee is bright by saying, well, she shines. But there's another word, isn't it? Normally, the simple sense, Krista, of the word shine would be what? What's that word normally mean?
Could be the star is shining.
Sure, and what does that mean? To say a star is shining, the sun is shining, so on. Shining in that sense means
Giving off light.
giving off light. And then, Sydney was talking about Kaylee shining. Did she mean the same thing by that? Giving off light? Same idea. You see, it's univocal. It's equivocal. It's equivocating on the meaning of the word. So far, so good. It's not difficult. But Aristotle noticed that. He noticed that we use language in a very fluid way, and he's concerned about when we put words in classes. That we're not doing it playing tricks with our words. That can become very slippery. So he wants us to be cautious as we do this. Go ahead.
Do you have a definition for equivocal?
Okay, so equivocal, thank you, is when you take a word and apply it to two different objects, and the meaning of the word with respect to those objects changes radically. You take the same word, apply it to two different objects, and the meaning of the word changes radically with respect to the, those two objects. Now be careful. I'm saying it changes radically, but I don't mean it changes utterly, so that they're totally unrelated. Here's two different words. Bear, bear. Right? What are the two meanings to that English word bear? Stephen, one of the meanings might be
The animal bear.
a bear that you find evidence of in the woods. Right? And then we also have an English word bear. In fact, we have another one over here. I guess we got three words I could use. What's another?
Carry.
To carry something. I am bearing a load. Okay? I don't think there's any connection. I don't think there's any point where the meanings of those two words are overlapping, right? It's two different words. What's another word for bear? What else? What's another word for bear?
Like almost naked.
That's right. Without clothing. Naked. Stripped. So there's three different applications of the word, the English word that's not spelled the same, of course, in each case, but of the word bear, right? So when I say the meaning changes radically, what I mean is that there's still a little point of contact. It doesn't change absolutely or utterly, but just very, very substantially. Now, the third kind of language lies right in the middle. Let's see. It is not as extreme as equivocal, but it's not as kind of consolidated as univocal. And this is the word, this is analogical language. And the meaning of this is that the meaning of the word changes proportionately with the thing being described. The meaning changes proportionately with the thing being described. Let's change the word, because it would be hard to illustrate this using the word bright, but we can think of, for example, the word good. All right. When I lived out in the country a few years ago, I had a dog. The dog's name was Cody. Because the dog was a Malamute. And so we were thinking of what? Why did we cleverly come up with the name Cody for a Malamute? What kind of dog is a Malamute? Anybody know? What does it look like? What is it? You know, Jake? What is it? What's a Malamute?
It's like a sled dog.
Sled dog. It's the kind you find in Alaska. We were thinking Kodiak. Hence, did you get that? You should have put your hand up, you see? All right, so anyway. Cody. Now, we don't have Cody anymore. When we moved back into town, we had to relinquish Cody. He was like a bear, you know. And we just thought, this is not going to work. He likes to run. He likes to be happy. And life in the little neighborhood is not going to fly so well. All right. So, here's my point. Let's say I came to school and I said, well, this dog that I've got, Cody, is a good dog. All right? I use that description to apply to Cody. Joe, what would you take that to mean? If I said that my dog Cody is a good dog, then you would probably infer from that what characteristics would apply to my dog Cody.
He is obedient.
All right, he's obedient. Let's get some of these down. He's obedient. What else? Joe? What else?
Let's see. Well, he's loyal.
Loyal. Anything else? You're actually setting much higher standards than would probably apply to Cody, who would chase after anything that came down the road, but...
He's friendly.
Friendly. Could be friendly. All right. What else? Thank you, Joe. That's good. What other kinds of things would come to mind? Ben?
Well, I think in general, it just means you like him.
This could be, I just like him.
I'm a medium dog, but everyone's like, oh, he's such a good dog.
Okay, all right. Well, usually people mean something if they say he's a good dog. Usually you mean what? What kind of practical stuff would you expect if you say that a dog is a good dog? Krista, you think what?
He doesn't bite.
He doesn't bite, you know, about the mailman. Not a problem with that. What else? There's another big one we usually think of. He's a good dog. He's therefore what? What? Go ahead, I think you said it.
You're saying he's a potty trained.
He's potty trained, he's housebroken, you know. Housebroken, we'll just abbreviate that. That kind of stuff. Maybe he brings my slippers, you know, if I ask him to, or the newspaper, something like that, without salivating on it too much. He's a good dog. All right, so notice that I've used the word good, and I've applied it to an object. And that, I hope, has induced in your mind a certain kind of object. The word good modified the object that it was applied to. And then if I come to school and I say, yeah, my dog Cody's a good dog, and hey, that George is a good man. He doesn't bite. He's potty trained. You know? Brings my slippers. Doesn't salivate too much. You see that without even thinking about it much, as soon as I take the word and apply it to a different object, your definition of good changes. You don't work at it. It just happens rather naturally, right? That's where the meaning of the word changes proportionately to the thing being described. Aristotle notices that when we use language, many times the language morphs depending on the context in which we use it. Yes?
I'm giving death lips.
Oh, there it is. See, I knew it. I would be just like I predicted, deep in this profound thought. All right, so good brownies are what? What does it mean to say a brownie is a good brownie? We've got a good dog, we've got a good man, we've got a good brownie. Kayla, what does it mean to say we're about to jump into some good brownies? What do you take that to mean?
Delicious.
Delicious? Anything else? Healthy, I'm sure. No? All right. All right, so good does not mean, in the case of the brownies, healthy. It will kill you, but what a way to go, right? While Nicole is carefully, dissecting, I guess would be the word, the brownies.
I'm trying to figure out how to get 20.
Oh, okay, well. I want you to think about this, just a closing thought here. I want you to think about the fact, this is from a Christian point of view, how we use language, because we would also say not only a dog is a good dog, we could say a man is a good man. We also say what? God is good, right? And do you see that as soon as we say that, we mean something quite different once again? Now follow that? The meaning of the word changed proportionately to the thing we were describing. And that's a warning to us to always be on our guard lest we think that the language we use about God can ever be any more than just analogical. We can never really talk about God univocally. The great champion of that point in church history is a guy by the name of, anybody want to take a guess? Who's the most famous person in church history to develop the point that all of our language about God is at best analogical. It is never univocal. And we'll return to this theme when we get to this character. His name is, anybody want to take a stab at this one? Anybody know? Jacob? Any theories? First name that comes to your mind is?
Kierkegaard?
That's not right, but that's a good guess. Good thought. He would probably even say it's not even quite analogical. All right, get this in your notes. Then I'll quit trying to distract you from what you're really interested in here. Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas. Were you thinking that? Hey, you gotta speak up. You gotta play ball in here a little bit. All right. I have about 3 more little things to say about Aristotle. We'll do those tomorrow. And for the rest of the period, we will simply enter into a state of nirvana.